Hey YouTube, this is Rescue Spark Fan 62. Um, AEW. If you don't know who they are, they're All Elite Wrestling. They've only been around for about a little over 6 years now, going on 6.5. And I want them to succeed, to be an alternative to WWE. It's just, there are things that they do that basically kick them in the butt. And which is why a lot of people are turning on them like crazy. From that excessive blood to a lot of these interesting spots to all this other stuff. And it's really annoying to see because they have potential. The first big thing you knew something was wrong was when they were going from college or professional basketball arenas all the way to barely music halls now. And there are times where they're barely filling those. And that is the sad part. They used to fill these 25,000 seat arenas. So essentially, by the time they added the stage and all of that, you were still looking at probably 20,000, give or take. I mean, heck, they filled the United Center in Chicago over a rumor that Punk was coming to AEW. A rumor. And that is the thing. That is the sort of thing I'm talking about. And then you have people like the Bucks, Kenny Omega, Tony Khan, the higher-ups in the company who essentially think this is one big joke, or just a person living out his dream, which is fine, but it's just the way he's gone at it is totally wrong. And then so right now there's probably around 200 wrestlers on the roster. And that's not even including backstage hands, coaches, all those other people that go in what makes a wrestling league like that tick every single week. However, it's just when you have that many people and you only have 4 to 4.5 hours, depending on the week, to fill, minus pay-per-views, that is where a lot of it can start going wrong, because you only have enough time in a week to fulfill 2 shows, minus pay-per-views. Well, 3 if you count Ring of Honor, which I'll get to. But it's one of those situations where Tony has gotten himself into this predicament, and I don't know how he's going to get himself out. Next, we have Ring of Honor. Now, when Tony bought it only a couple of years ago, it wasn't the best promotion. And the problem with it is that Tony has essentially made it worse than it originally is. Because it essentially has almost none of the original Ring of Honor wrestlers in it. It doesn't have a TV deal. It's on a streaming service, which I think it's like $7.99 a month or something like that, called like Honor Club, I believe. And what Tony needs to do is essentially make Ring of Honor like NXT is to WWE. That way, for people who come in, they can see, okay, this is the way we do things. These are the rules for AEW, etc. Stuff like that. Instead of, okay, here you go, good luck. Essentially, the way Tony works with this is one person goes out, he hires 3 more. So we're only barely 3 weeks into 2026. And he's already hired 10 people, 9 now, because one just quit. He's lost 1 and hired 9. This is the type of thing I'm talking about. And then you have other people who've been with the promotion since day 1 or year 1 or, in that ballpark, who essentially just sit at home and collect a paycheck every 2 weeks or how often they get paid. And basically, unless they can do the indies, they don't really do anything until they get a call saying, hey, we need you. And then you better hope and pray that person has been doing ring training somewhere. Otherwise, they are going to be very rusty on national television. That is the type of thing I'm talking about. And it shows that Tony doesn't have the right mind when it comes to something like that. And I just don't know what he can do. That is the sad part. I just don't know. The other thing he needs to do a couple times a year is for people who essentially aren't being used, or they're used here and there, get rid of them. You're like, oh, that's a WWE thing. True. But the thing is, that is most companies. If you're essentially sitting at home, and unless you're injured, you're sick, or something like that, that is the only way you can get around not being released. But the problem is with Tony is he wants to keep everybody he can and still pay them, every 2 weeks or whatever. So essentially you're like in a vacation all year unless you get called into work. And then you have people like the Bucks who only get used when they have to, or they only have so many days in their contract they can work before Tony's has to pay even more money to pay them. So this is the type of thing I'm talking about. There needs to be something where Tony looks over everybody on his roster and be like, okay, we need to release this person, this person, this person, this person, this person, this person, and this person, which is going to save me X amount of money. Because of money does not last forever, especially with the amount he spends. Now, I get the Khan family is a very rich family. I get that. The problem is that eventually, Shad Khan or somebody in that family, it's going to be like, is this wrestling promotion worth it? And you better hope and pray somebody says yes. Because the other factor you have in this equation as well is the potential sale of Warner Brothers Discovery later this year to Netflix. That is going to be the interesting part in this scenario, because who is on Netflix right now? Raw. So how is Dynamite and Collision going to go up with, Raw? And what is going to happen with pay-per-views? Stuff like that. Which brings me to pay-per-views. The problem with an AEW pay-per-view is it essentially is like you're going into a school day because it's almost 6 to 8 hours long. Why does a pay-per-view need to be that long? This is the type of stuff I'm talking about regarding Tony and the way he works. If you get that out of him, he will be fine. But until he can get away from this indie-minded nonsense, he's just going to keep going down, down, and down, and keep spending more and more and more and more. So I want to hear from you. Have you watched AEW? Have you gave up on AEW? Are you a former sicko? Do you currently watch it?